Good evening. This is the JP Dinnell podcast, episode 20. I am JP Dinnell, and always I have Lucas with me. Sermons We See by Edgar A. Guest. I'd rather see a sermon than hear one any day. I'd rather one should walk with me than merely tell me the way. The eye's a better pupil and more willing than the ear. Fine counsel is confusing, but examples always clear. And the best of all the preachers are the men who live their creeds. For to see good put in action is what everybody needs. I soon can learn to do it if you let me see it done. I can watch your hands in action, but your tongues too fast may run. And the lectures you deliver may be very wise and true, but I'd rather get my lessons by observing what you do. For I might misunderstand you and the high advice you give, but there is no misunderstanding how you act and how you live. When I see a deed of kindness, I am eager to be kind. When a weaker brother stumbles and a strong man stays behind, just to see if he can help him, then the wish grows strong in me to become as big and thoughtful as I know that friend to be. And all the travelers can witness that the best of guides today is not the one who tells them, but the one who shows them the way. One good man teaches many. Men believe what they behold. One deed of kindness notices its worth, 40 that are told. Who stands with men of honor learns to hold his honor dear, for right living speaks a language which to everyone is clear. Though an able speaker charms me with his eloquence, I say, I'd rather see a sermon than hear one any day. So I first read this poem in a book my buddy PJ gave me called Think Like a Horse, Lessons in Life, Leadership, and Empathy from an Unconventional Cowboy by Grant Gallagher. I hope I said his name correctly. Funny, PJ actually has a connection to this guy. I guess he used to ranch with him, or...
That's crazy.
Yeah, I know. It's freaking insane. It's like my dream life right there. It was in the introduction portion of the book, and it really stood out to me. And I think adding that poem into the very beginning of the book set the tone, and man, it sucked me in. Because and the reason why I started with that is, man, there's so many ways we can go from that poem. Think about it. Like you as
there's a ton of stuff that it sets up for any kind of conversation.
I was watching your body language while I was reading, kind of out of this. So I just changed. Think about it from a leadership standpoint, in like regards to like, hey, you actually have a leadership title at work,
right?
In your business, as a pastor, as a member of Echelon Front, as a father. Both of us are fathers, as husbands, as friends. There's just so many ways you can go about it. And so I just started reading the book again. I was telling you, man, I have a really bad habit where like I'll start a book and I'll get halfway through it, and then somebody else will be like recommend a book, and I'll order the book, and then I'll like open up a few pages and I get sucked in, then I stop reading it. But what I need to do is just keep reading it, and it's okay to read a few books at the same time.
I've got to have a couple books going at the same time.
See, I've never done that before. I'm going to try it out. It makes sense. It actually makes sense to me. So anyways, I just started reading again. And to be honest, like I said, I got distracted and stopped reading it. So anyways, I wanted to share that tonight because I feel like there's so many topics we can branch out and go through from this. And I'm honestly curious to see how the conversation goes tonight with this as a foundation. But before we get started there, man, last week's episode with my daughters was hilarious.
It was, that's the most fun I've ever had editing a podcast, like hands down. And all of the stuff, like just from a behind the scenes perspective, like watching y'all in the pre-roll and just y'all figuring out like what your dynamics are going to be for the podcast. You kind of like setting the ground rules as a dad of like, hey, this is the stuff that's going to happen. And then in the middle of the pod, there were a couple of times where the girls are like, I'm like, oh no, it's not supposed to say that. And then you could just see like they start to say something, but the amount of times that they just like genuinely cracked us up was so great.
I mean, you were in the group text for our Jesus and Jiu-Jitsu podcast.
Right. Yeah.
And I was just like letting those guys know, just, hey, heads up, there's going to be tears of laughter and tears of just like as a father and as like uncle figures that those guys are.
Yeah.
You know, to our daughters, I was just like, hey, heads up. You know, I gave a few people heads up. And like I was talking to Justin Blythe, who works with me. I'm like, hey, just giving you a heads up. And he's like, bro, thank you, because that would have wrecked me.
No doubt.
And I have a few people that are close like that. You know what I mean? Like, obviously, you guys from the Jesus and Jiu-Jitsu podcast, you know, Danny that I work with, Justin.
Yeah, I'm sure the guys at the church.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The Milestone Men guys that you know, we did a little jiu-jitsu with those guys this morning.
We did. Yep, I'm going to be feeling that for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah. Well, and so, but, you know, I was talking to Amanda, and it was really hard to articulate to Amanda properly just how much fun I had.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, besides creating those core memories, which there's definitely core memories that were created during that session, just for me, I felt like it was a special opportunity. Like I was like documenting a section of our life together, which I know a lot of people don't get that opportunity to do so. So anyways, for me, it was pretty cool to be able to do that.
It's one of those, like, I look at it as a legacy building thing. And we've talked, I think we talked about it on Jesus. I know we talked about it on Jesus and Jiu-Jitsu. We might've talked about it here, like how I do my studies, that I handwrite out.
Yeah, that was on Jesus and Jiu-Jitsu episode. Yeah. I can't remember which one.
So like the short version is, like, when I prep my sermons, I handwrite out the verses that I'm going to go over, and then what my thoughts on it are, and then I handwrite everything that I have in, like that I'm getting from the different commentaries, my outlines for my sermons, all those kinds of things, so that like my kids will have that. Yeah. And this is one of those things that, like, you know, when your grandkids or your great grandkids are like, hey, you know, they're going to, whether you like it or not, they are going to hear about JP Dinnell as a legend in some way, shape. But like I said, whether I know you don't.
I'm telling you.
But I'm telling you, it will be in, even if it's only in your family, right? Yeah. Because of the example that you are and the tone that you set for how you're going to raise your family, how you're going to treat your wife, how you're going to treat your daughters, how you're going to raise your son. Like, you are setting a legacy for all of them. And so the legacy that you set is going to be passed down, just like it was from our dads and from our grandparents. And so, like, the way that we talk about, you know, like you talk about your grandma, your grandmother in your mind is a legendary lady.
100%. And absolutely. Yeah. And anybody who spends more than 5 minutes with her gets it as well. They're like, okay, I get it. Yeah,
and so, like, how special would that be if they were, you know, your grandkids who may never get to meet her, right? If they got to see, like, hey, this is what it was like when we were growing up, and there's an hour of just her and y'all interacting together. And so, like, those are the kind of things that, like, core memories were made, but also there's a legacy there, and that they'll see more than just, here's some photos of your granddad, here's some photos of your great granddad, whatever. Like, you have the ability to show them how much you actually cared for them, how well you know your daughters, where you're, like, telling them as they're about to say something, you're like, don't stop, don't say that, you know. And then at the end, you know what Nola says, bro, that got me. It was intense, man. Yeah, but it's also one of those things that, like, that's the legacy that you're leaving. That's the impression that you're giving your daughters of how much you love and care for them, and that's going to be something that carries on. Yeah, so that's pretty cool, man. But freaking hilarious.
It was awesome,
just unreal. I think that's the only episode that my wife has listened to of our show.
She got to listen to it ahead of she got a little sneak peek.
Yeah. She got a sneak peek.
That's awesome. I know we're going to dive into a few things, you know, talking about jiu-jitsu. We have some Q&A. We'll talk about this poem, pull the thread on it a little bit. But for those of you guys listening, we appreciate, you know, we get a lot of good feedback from you guys, which is awesome. A lot of good interaction. And so one of the things, we're going to keep doing this podcast every Friday for sure.
Yep.
No matter what. On iTunes, I say no matter what, but our goal is no matter what on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. But one of the things that we want to do, we've had a few people ask if we could have more Q&A sessions.
Yeah.
And what I don't want to do is take away from diving into Bible verses or sections of books. Like, again, we're not gonna do what Jocko does. I don't want to do that. I literally have zero desire to read a whole book and digest it and then break it down. Plus, we want to keep ours at that 90-minute mark. And if it goes over 2 hours with an interview, that's fine because someone's telling a story, but we want to keep it under the 90-minute mark. But we have to balance it out. It's like, hey, we have a good amount of guests coming up.
Yeah.
Like, I have a good amount of guests that are lined up. It's going to be awesome. And so what we're going to do, and this is going to be on YouTube only, is randomly throughout the week, we're going to drop some Q&A sessions on YouTube.
Some quick hitters, like between maybe 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah, 15, 20 minutes max. Try to get through 2 to 3 questions, and those will be dropped throughout the week on YouTube. So if you're listening to us on any of the platforms, we appreciate it. If you are not subscribed to our YouTube podcast, please go to YouTube and just look up JP Dinnell Podcast, subscribe.
And then make sure you ding the notification bell.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, because when you hit that, if you just subscribe, a lot of times it won't let you know when one of those episodes drops.
Oh, right.
And so, but if you hit that notification bell, like, you'll get the push notifications, or as soon as you get onto your YouTube app, or whether it's at home
to the top
on your
or
TV or whatever, ittle be on the top and say, hey, this is new within like the last however minutes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And then if you guys have any questions, go to our YouTube channel, and then in any of the ones, we read all the comments. We've been trying to respond to all of them. I've been trying to get in there. I know, Lucas, you've been doing a good job responding to all of them. I'm getting caught up on that as well. But if you ask questions in there, we're capturing those questions.
Yep.
And then we're also going to have stuff on Instagram. So if you're following me on Instagram, I'll randomly make posts on there like, hey, we're going to do a Q&A session coming up. And so we want to make sure that we get your questions. And then also, when you're doing it on YouTube and Instagram, like, we'll have your name. We can give you a shout out. If that's something you want. If you don't, then just say, hey, I would like to be anonymous. That's cool as well. We respect that.
Yeah. Or you can actually email us. We got a podcast@jpdinnell.com.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. If there's any email questions, if you're like, I don't have a YouTube account where I comment and I don't want to get an Instagram, then you can email us if you got any questions about any of that stuff.
I didn't even think about that. That's rad. Mm-hmm. Cool. So that'll be coming up after this is done, probably the next week randomly, or the following week.
Yeah, we'll probably drop our first one in the next couple of weeks after this comes out. Yeah.
Okay, so this one is coming out on, I believe, February 9th. And so that following week, whether Monday through Thursday, we'll do a little short one.
Yeah, we'll drop our first one and kind of
cool.
Intro everybody to it.
Okay, awesome. Dude, Jiu-Jitsu this morning.
Yeah.
What's going on? How was that? That was fun having you there.
You know exactly how it was because I sent you a text message that described. I'll read it, and just let everybody know exactly how I felt this morning. I got to meet Formiga at Jesus in Jiu-Jitsu. What session was that was held on that Saturday?
Like which number was it?
Like event, yeah, like 014, I think, something like that. 1214, something like that. Got to meet Formiga, which was awesome. This is the text that I sent you guys. I'm weak. I'm gassed. My IT bands in my hips have been replaced with rubber bands at some point in the last 5 years. And Ryan Kramer is too pretty for me to roll with. I didn't know if I should try to pass his guard or kiss him. That was that was what I sent. And I got some great rolls in. The guys there were very cognizant of the fact that I haven't been on the mat in 5 years. They let me work, provided some great resistance whenever I was just trying to get in and out of different positions. And I didn't try to go for any submissions or anything today. I was more or less like, how can I get back into rolling? How am I going to feel after this? My hips have become so inflexible in the last several years. That's what I noticed more than anything. I've always had some IT band issues from lifting heavy for a guy with a small frame. And today I was every time we were doing those knee shield passes.
Oh yeah.
Right. So every time we got into that position, both like the IT bands and my hips were like, bro, you got like 3 seconds to pull this off, or we're just gonna rock
Snap.
it. Yeah, we're gonna end up on the other side of the mat. So
That's
it was
awesome.
good, man. And
Formiga's ability to teach,
bro, not only his ability to teach, like before, because this is the first time I've seen him teach. Because at the event, JB I think is who taught it. He was great,
dude. That dude's a legend.
He's awesome. But Formiga's humility and generosity are unbelievable. So, there were a couple of guys from Milestone that were there today. They were checking some stuff out. It was Pastor Ethan's birthday, so happy birthday!
Happy
to him.
birthday!
It's really cool. And so Formiga comes over and he asked me. He's like, "So I know, these guys are kind of checking stuff out, but you're thinking about training jiu-jitsu again and all this." And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "I got some rolls. We're going to start rolling in a little bit. Do you want to do some stuff with them, or do you want? I can take you over here and I can show you some things, and you and I can roll together to kind of see where you're at." And I'm like, holy crap! Like, I don't know what a private with him costs, right? But I can't imagine that it's like the junior high saxophone teacher is like, it's going to be $45 for a half hour. Like, I can't imagine that's going to be the deal.
I don't know exactly, but I think they start. I don't know. The last I knew, they were over $200 an hour.
Yeah, which is probably undervalued.
100%.
Right? So, like, just the offer of that to like help me get an assessment to see where I'm at. It's like, let me just go through with everybody else, right? You got a lot of stuff that you're doing. And he was like, okay, well, if you're sure, like, yeah, sure. And then we get into the rounds and he's like, I want to, what do you want to do? So I know who to pair you up with. I'm like, man, I just want to go, right? I just need to get back on the mat, feel some pressure and get going again. And he paired me up with some guys that did that exactly. The dude's humility and generosity is completely, man, it's inspiring.
Yes. Yep.
And then you watch him teach and, his ability to explain things clearly.
It's insane.
The last jiu-jitsu school I was at, there were several affiliate gyms, and I ended up working out at one of the affiliate gyms pretty often. And the instructors were sometimes really, really clear, and other times they weren't, particularly if it was a new black belt or a lower level belt, like between, purple, brown, something like that, because it's not that they weren't capable of it. Their jiu-jitsu was focused on something else, right? Okay, so you're teaching me how to do like a basic leg sweep. You've been doing basic leg sweeps for 7 years. You're really fascinated with lasso guard. If they had you teach something from lasso, like, you'd be able to blow it out of the water right now. But they want you to teach a basic leg sweep. And the instruction was mediocre. They weren't giving it 100%. And there was some of that. And as much as I loved the people that owned the gym, the affiliate gym that I was training at, and some of the connections that I made, like, that was one of the things where even towards the end of my tenure that I was like, before touring my ACL, I've got to find some people that are like really wanting to invest into this. And the amount of classes that guy teaches, his ability to teach is mind-blowing.
For me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's unreal.
It's crazy.
I've had a few people, like Pastor Drew from Milestone. He brought his son Max to train at 555. Mm-hmm. And he thought it was just like, at first he didn't realize that Formiga and Victoria, who's a world champion black belt as well, that the two of them teach all the kids' classes.
Really?
Yeah, and Victoria, she's incredible, and her husband's a black belt as well.
Yeah,
Trey, and it's just unreal. Like, that's what that's who your kids are being taught by.
Yeah, Victoria is who you were saying, like, to your girls, like, hey, if she asked you to teach or if she asked you to compete, would you? And both of them were like, yeah, 100% if she asked.
Yeah, because she has that influence over them,
right.
And also, she's a really good instructor, and she it's unreal. She teaches like Formiga, and you're like, So think about that. Like, and hey, this is not dogging any other gyms that
Sure.
have
Yeah,
lower
for sure.
belts that teach their kids. That's fine. Sometimes
Yeah, I mean,
they do it by
Isaac is a
growth and
purple belt,
develop.
and he teaches and does a great job.
Yeah, that's
right?
fine.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. But he also has a black belt who's there observing. And we also have a blue belt, Mike Brown. I'm sorry, he's not a purple belt, who's freaking teaches a kids class there, but he's teaching under Formiga and Victoria. But Formiga and Victoria are there every class for the kids unless they're gone on vacation. And it's unreal. And so Drew was like, this is who my son gets to learn from every single day. And I'm like, yeah. He's like, bro, this is a no-brainer to be signed up here. And it's cool. And then like for me to being there this morning, every Tuesday and Thursday, if you want to drive to Highlands Village, 5 and train with us, 6:30 Tuesdays and Thursdays, we're there. Ryan Kramer's there. Isaac was there this morning. Yep. Josh Strasburger most of the time was there, but he flew in late last night from an FTX out in Arizona. Yep. And
he hooked me up with this new hat I got from the mustard.
Oh yeah, I noticed that. I was like, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to give you the glory at all.
Not going to give me the satisfaction.
No, I was not going to give you the satisfaction.
I know you did such a good job.
I was like, either I'm not going to say anything, or he's going to have to bring it up, and I'm just going to.
Yeah, no, Joshy brought me this hat back, and I had a buddy of mine who made patches. I was like, I have an idea.
That's amazing.
Thank you. I got you one.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got you one. I didn't want you to feel left out. So there it is.
I'm going to give it to Cora.
Okay, you can give it to Cora.
She called you out.
Cool. You can give that to Cora. Funny. And then we got one for Leif, and we made one for Jocko.
Yeah,
also.
I'll make sure
you just go ahead and give them their mustard patches.
That's going to be... It's going to be unique.
Yeah.
That's all I'll say.
And tell them thanks.
I will. What was I talking about?
That their book, Extreme Leadership, changed my life.
Oh, my gosh. We were talking about that before we were recording, how it drives me crazy how people are like, man, yeah, Jacko and Leaf. I know those guys so well. I'm like, you know them? Mm-hmm. Well, I follow them on Instagram. I listen to podcasts. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And they're like, yeah, their book, Extreme Leadership, changed my life. I mean,
they did.
Extreme Ownership.
Yep.
It's awesome. Leif will correct people. Because I'll be at events and be like, hey, the book Extreme Leadership changed my life. And Leif's like, well, clearly not that much because it's extreme ownership. And like he'll make it like a joking thing. And he has the ability to literally connect with people.
Right.
By, which is awesome. Or when people are like, oh yeah, cover, move. Or they'll be like, move and cover. And he'll be like, cover, move.
Cover, move.
And it's like just those little subtle corrections.
Yeah. I really love the duck and dodge part of the book. That was my favorite. It's one of those things that, like, so there's an old pastor. This is just, I don't know if this is actually true. There's this old pastor, and he asked his congregation one day, he's like, all right, one of the things that's so that troubles a lot of people about the Bible is that they don't read it. He goes, so here's what I want you to do. It's like my favorite chapter in all the Bible. It's Matthew 29. You need to go read it. And so he tells this to his congregation, and then the next week he's like, all right, who did what I asked? Who read Matthew 29? Man, these people stand up really proud. He's like, all right, so y'all are all liars because Matthew 29 doesn't exist.
As soon as you said that, I'm like, I don't think
that's like his whole thing was like, this is the one chapter in the Bible that if you read it, you'll really understand everything. And they went and that was it. And I think that there's a lot of us that are kind of in that boat. Like we understand like some of the basic concepts. We really want to have the same kind of like life changing experience or leadership changing experience from the book. And so we know what the right things to say are, but when it comes to like being able to articulate it, we didn't really pay that much attention. Our boss gave us the book and paid for us to be at the mustard, and so now we're here instead. You
missed over the one section where they say humility is one of the top characteristics of a great leader.
Yeah, the number one thing. Right?
Yeah, and then all of a sudden you're freaking making stuff up.
Yep, that's a really great tactic.
I mean,
I think that's kind of like the definition of a tactical win and not a strategic win. It's like the lie that gets you out of the situation. Yeah. Yep. That's certainly tactical over strategic.
Major strategic loss because those things come out in the long run. You're like, why did you lie about that?
Yeah.
Why is that something you lie about? Just say you didn't read it. Or if you get corrected, be like, man, I'm sorry. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Hey, or, or just say that you don't know.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Pretty easy.
I've never lost respect for somebody when they're like, hey, actually, I don't know. Not once have I ever, if you and I are having a conversation, I ask you a question, you're like, you know what, honestly, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
There's not one situation where I'm like, whatever. And I was thinking about that because Cody and I were at an FTX recently, and we were running through that, and that came up. It was like, just tell the truth. Like, just tell somebody that you don't know. It's okay to say you don't know.
It's way better.
Or, hey, you know what? I don't know, but let me get back to you.
Right.
Let me get back to you. And I remember when this was in August of 2017. I was doing a full day workshop out in, out in California. My buddy Jeff McGreevy set it up. He was my buddy I told you about, where he was setting up this event, and he literally went door to door knocking, telling businesses and about the event. And it was like an individual ticket sale event similar to the muster, and it was to raise money for this foundation, for the police foundation out there. It was awesome. Great thing. Awesome. And I mean, I think we had like 300 or 400 people there. Whoa. I think. I don't know. Jeff, if you're listening, you can correct us on YouTube, right?
Yeah. Put it in the comments, Jeff.
Anyways, I remember there was one comment that I got. I remember sitting there, and he's asking this question. And the guy was like, let me give you a little more information. I'm like, thank God. Because at first, like, he's asking, I'm like, I don't know the answer. Like, I couldn't comprehend it. I couldn't comprehend it. And he keeps like diving deeper into it. And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, man, I don't want to give this guy just a halfway answer.
Right.
Like, I want to actually be able to. And I remember going, hey, can I phone a friend? Like, can I call Jocko right now? And he like starts laughing. I said, here's what here's what I think. Mm-hmm. I said, but what I want to do, because I think we were connected on Twitter. Well, now it's X and Instagram. And I said, I'm going to call Jocko after this workshop and ask him the same question. And I'm going to call Leif as well. And I'm going to get their feedback. And then I'll get back to you. Is that cool? He goes, dude, I respect that. Thank you. And he even was like, man, I don't know the answer to this. He goes, right. I've been dealing with, and this guy was a very smart, very successful guy. He'd been in the game. He'd been to a few musters. And so, like, I mean, and this was like one of the OG guys that was following Jocko at the very beginning. Right. Read the book right when it first came out, and was at the very first muster. Oh, wow. Came to a few other ones. I mean, the guy was awesome. Yeah. Very smart, very articulate guy. And he had a crazy scenario. And I just remember, like, I was like, I don't actually know. At that time, I didn't know what answer to give him. And so I said, here's what I think, but I'll get back to you. And it was cool because he was good with that. And then afterwards we talked, and he was like, he's like, you don't have to worry about getting back to me. He goes, I think I know the answer. You helped me figure it out. And we kind of like went down this path of asking more questions and talking about it later. Mm-hmm. But it's like one of those things like, hey, if you don't know, just tell somebody you don't know. I mean, it's not a big deal.
Well, and I think one of the things that's so important to that, and it kind of like gets to some of the things in the poem that we opened with, is that humility is not something that can be told that you have. It's something that has to be exemplified, right? Mm-hmm. Like you can't explain to someone how to be humble. They have to see that. Yeah. And like today, I saw it in Formiga. When when we're out, particularly if we are at anything that involves the echelon front, it is something that is exemplified in you. When you go, and when I was at Muster 017, like Jocko and Leif set the tone for what that looks like. That there was nobody, whether it was the people who were there, folks that just stopped them in the hotel, or the hotel staff that they didn't stop and give time to. There was a guy from the hotel staff that came up and grabbed, I think it was Leif, and it had to have been Jocko was kind of in the area. Leif had just gotten done signing some books, and he was just one of the guys who was like serving lunch or something. Mm-hmm. Guy was like, hey, I've heard your stuff. I think you get, and he just sat there and chatted with him for a little bit.
It's unreal.
And it was, there was no, pomp and circumstance or airs or any of that. And he just had some questions about like, what they were talking about and all this. And he was cool, answered it. And it's one of those conversations that was so natural that in my mind, I'm like, I don't know if Leif is even going to remember that happened, right? Like I've heard he's got a stellar memory and like remembers everything, right?
It's unreal.
But it's also like, that's one of 1,000 conversations that he had, and he treated everybody the same way. So for that guy, it meant a lot, but for Leif, that's just who he is. And that's I think that for me, like the crux of this is like, particularly with humility, like it's 100% exemplified. It's not something that you can just, read about and say, oh, well, this is how you be humble. You've got to see it lived out.
And what's cool is like what you're talking about ties into this poem.
Right.
Because if you looked at how your rolls went this morning with all upper belts, did any of them like come head hunting you?
No.
Now they were pushing the pace. I'm sure a few of them were, as you should.
Right.
But I mean, you had rounds with guys that if they wanted to, they could have just been like, all right, just turn it up. Now you have a base and a foundation. You would have been fine.
Sure. But that very first roll I had with Kramer, like there's no way I would have made it through the first 20 seconds if he wanted to just crush me.
I can't last for the first 20 seconds with Kramer unless he makes a mistake and I capitalize on it. Right. That's the only way if he's going full blown. So yes, you had that round with Kramer, and then Justin, the purple belt, was letting you work and moving around, and he's good, man. Like when he turns it up, you're like, ooh, game's got to be tight.
Yeah,
and then the blue belt, and so. The reason why I'm bringing that up, it's a great example of Formiga's humility is how he acts, his gym acts.
Yep.
His jiu-jitsu family replicates Formiga. And it's crazy. Like when you come to a noon class one of these days, Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, we do noon open to anybody. We have a lot of gyms that show up and just cross train. So all you do is to sign a waiver, come, it's free. I mean, the last time I was there, it was either the last time or the time before I had a noon class. We had 17 black belts there.
Bro.
High-level black belts that compete. Few world champions in there. Pan Am's champs. Like just unreal. They're all coming there to train there for a reason because they're getting those rounds in. The instruction's awesome.
Literally the best in the world.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And yet, I'll be able to go and get solid rounds in. And I'm not getting hurt. These guys aren't trashing me. They're not trashing the blue belts and the white belts that show up. Like you're going to get what you need from that. And to me, it's a perfect example of just how you show people to be humble.
Yeah.
I mean, you can explain to people humility and why it's important, but you can't tell somebody, hey, do this and be humble. You have to show them. And there has to be that self-awareness. Like people have to be aware of that to actually be humble. And when you're around humble people, that's the best way.
Yeah. And this, I think the point that he's making works both ways, right? So we've talked about Formiga's humility and the way that that my rolls went this morning. So I've got a buddy who got his blue belt several years ago because he was able to, as a white belt, he tapped the instructor.
That's rad.
Right? So he tapped the instructor, and the instructor was like, there's never been a white belt that's done that to me before.
Boom,
so
blue belt.
Here's your blue belt.
That's cool.
Right? The next roll that instructor had, he dislocated the shoulder of one of his purple belts because he was so frustrated that that white belt tapped him out because he gave him the blue belt, and he was like, he's like, we're not going to roll again. Like, you and I are done for this round. And he's like, he's like, I'm giving you your blue belt. Congratulations. But I don't want to hear about it. He's like, I don't want to hear about this. And the guy was like, yeah, cool, whatever. And it seemed kind of like a joke. Well, he was so upset that the next round that he rolled, he dislocates the shoulder of one of his purple belts. Right? Now, come to find out, like this particular gym is known for injuring people. And if you come in, especially if you come in from another gym or, you're wanting to cross-train, like the people that they cross-train with get injured all the time. And they don't do well in tournaments because most of the guys, whenever they go into tournaments, they're coming into tournaments injured. Like they've had a couple of people who have done really well, but that same thing is that it comes from that leader. is because they're seeing this leader who,
That's
he
insane.
got tapped by a lower level belt. He gave him the blue belt, and everybody was like, great, like this guy's getting recognition. Well, then he threw a fit and he hurt somebody. And then now that has become the reputation of that gym. And several of the people several people who have been injured there have been injured with moves that that you shouldn't be using on lower level belts. Like, if you're rolling with a white belt and he starts to get the better of you and you heel hook him, you can really hurt him. And they've done that on multiple occasions.
Yeah.
And they hide behind the waiver. But that's the same thing. Like, that's what's exemplified is that. And so that's how every other person in that gym goes. Like, you're going to prove yourself by hurting somebody. So as much as the example for being humble is important, we also have to realize that people are looking to us even when we're responding negatively to things. Those negative examples and the negative things that we do and those negative actions that we have when we're in a leadership position, everybody south of us is looking at that, and they're going to start to replicate that as well. And that's a really dangerous position to be in.
Yeah. So we have a brown belt at double five. I just met him officially like the other night, and he was actually at the Jesus and Jiu-Jitsu event. And he actually won the giveaway. So like what we do at some of the Jesus and Jiu-Jitsu events moving forward is buy a raffle ticket and you get like a bundle of Jocko Fuel products or other stuff like for free. And he won it. And he saw me, this was Tuesday night. Yeah, I flew in and then I went straight to the gym. Did not want to. I was been freaking smoked this week. I know you and I were talking about that. And anyways, I freaking go. We're training, and I'm rolling with his brown belt. And he's. I could tell he's a little older than me, but I mean the dude's like a stud. He's in really good shape. You can tell, and I mean, he's a brown belt. And I'm like, okay, cool. So we roll and we get in some position, and I go for a leg. Just so like I was going to go for a straight ankle lock, and because he had my leg. Yeah, that's right. So he had my leg and he was going for something, and I was able to like resist a little bit. And then what I thought was cool was he slowly amped it up from there. Like was amping it up, and I had something, and I was stopping it, and then he amped it up. And then it got to the point where I was like, I don't know what to do next. Because leg games, like, I don't know the leg game. I need to start training it for sure. I know that. And I was going to say, I know a little bit, but that's a stretch. I know a little bit of a little bit. And I thought it was awesome. Like, this guy could have just freaking
just destroyed you.
And it was on my leg where I have my ace, it's on my left leg. So he had my left ankle, and he had it locked in, and he was like, he was turning the heel so I could start to feel it in my knee. And this is my knee where my ACL is torn in two different spots, and my meniscus is torn 40%. So that knee's not ideal.
Right.
And I was just like, I don't know and it started to feel like a little bit of pain, but it was crazy. Like, he was just being such a gentleman about it.
Yeah.
And I was like
a
trying
wild
to find
thing for some people to hear. When it comes to this kind of stuff, like people, I think people that are outside of the jiu-jitsu world do not understand that we don't try to injure our training partners, but that there's a point where when you're rolling with somebody where you can just be like, okay, this is the submission I'm going for. You can feel it.
Yeah,
but I'm not
a little catch and release.
Yep, exactly.
Which he could, and then I ended up. I'm like tap because I didn't know if he was going to keep going. I was feeling the pressure, and the dude was like super humble. He's like, "Bro, you got some big, strong legs." And I'm like, "Thank you." He's like, "No." He's like, "I tried to do this." He's like, "I couldn't do anything." He's like, "You shut it down." I'm like, "Oh." I was like, "I didn't even know what I was doing." I was like, my joke is, I'll always be like, I was in panic mode. I was in fear for my life. And he starts laughing.
That was me all morning this morning.
Yeah. And like when for me, he was saying, like, I'm like, I'm just in fear when I'm doing that Turkish get up. But so I was like, hey man, can you show that? And so we had another round, and he's like, hey man, I'll show you next time we roll. Super nice. See him tonight at Jiu-Jitsu. He's like, hey man, I'm going to show you the leg thing. And no, I'm sorry. He was like, "Hey, are you gonna roll?" And I was literally getting ready to say, "I want you to show me that the leg thing," but I didn't have my stuff because I wasn't gonna train tonight. It wasn't in the schedule for me to train tonight. And we start talking, and it was just awesome how things start to unfold. He's like, "You were in the teams?" And I'm like, "Yeah." I'm like, "You?" He's like, "No." I'm like, What'd you do though? He's like, bro, you remember how Mike was talking so highly of warrant officers, and they're like kind of untouchable, and helicopter pilots, the warrant officers that I was like, warrant officers that are helicopter pilots are like the 160th group guys. Yeah, that's what this guy did.
Nice.
20 plus years.
All right. A little bit of experience there.
I was like, hey, do you want to come on my podcast? He was like, yeah, I would love to.
Really?
Oh yeah. So we'll get him in here.
Dude, that'd be awesome.
But yeah, just a stud, right?
Yeah.
Super humble guy. And it just was incredible. Like, and it's just so funny. Like, as I'm pulling the thread, learning more about, like, the guy easily could have just blew apart my knee, just broken my leg easily. Didn't, was humble. Find out he's like 52 or 53.
Yeah.
He's in phenomenal shape still. And so the guy, this is just like another prime example of, just being a good human and setting the tone. And guess what? His kids train jiu-jitsu.
No doubt.
And guess how his kids act?
Probably like that.
They're very polite. They're respectful. They're humble. And they freaking kick butt, dude. His daughters are gangsters.
I don't know. I can't remember the kid's name. 12-year-old kid who was there this morning.
Oh, Anthony's son. No, not Anthony.
I want to say that the kid's a punk, but I can't say that the kid's a punk because he was super polite.
Oh, yeah.
And he was so nice. And as we're going through, because Formiga took a few of us aside and was like, hey, you know what? So they showed this one technique, and we were drilling the niche, some kind of knee shield pass or something. And then he was like, all right, so if you guys are going to jump in and do some rolls, here's 3 things you should know. One is like this little sweep. Another was an Americana. And then the other was just like a way to like kind of escape if you get stuck in somebody's guard. All good things to know. And he's like, it's going to happen to you. Here's a submission that you can try if you feel like, you can get there. And so this kid who's tall for 12, we start, kind of, I'm going to do the Americana on him, and I was going to do something. He's like, you want to get your elbow all the way down? And a part of me is like, shut up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I'm not there yet. But the other part is the obviously the part that wins out was like, I'm looking at him and like, which elbow? My elbow? Which one of my elbows or your elbow am I supposed to get all the way down?
Yeah.
And he's like, no, it's this one here. Got it. Did it nice and slow. Good. Went to the other side, and he was like, okay, this time I'm going to give you a little bit of resistance. And it was a lot of resistance for the weight and size difference between it. And
so but
it was great. It was perfect. He didn't resist too much. And like that, if the junior high kids understand.
So you want to take
that's crazy.
Just a wild guess at what his dad's like?
Yeah, his
dad's a stud. His dad was there.
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
So his dad, Jeremy Jones. I said Anthony because Anthony.
Yeah, I met Jeremy this morning. Yeah.
So Jeremy, he also a Pursuit brother, went to Pursuit.
Yep,
he was
with
Louisville
with
firefighter.
Isaac, like a 05. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a Louisville firefighter. He's an awesome guy, stud in jiu-jitsu, and that's his son. And his son is a respectful young man who trains hard, who and like he's helping you. He's like, he's not being smart. He's being genuine.
No, yeah,
like, hey,
he's being genuine.
And like, it's fun to watch him roll against adults that are like brand new and they struggle.
Yeah. Oh, no
So
doubt.
you have a base and a foundation, so you're going to be fine. But watch.
I would have struggled against this kid. And I have the impression that just about every human being looks at me and is like, what is this idiot doing here at any given point in my life? No. I'm just like, if I walk into the supermarket, that's the impression that I feel like I give people. So but for him to just like full on, for me, it was like, yep, I want you to go with him. We did the thing. He was like, make sure your elbow's down. I was like, cool. I got really solid instruction from a 12-year-old. And like I said, my initial reaction was like, I heard what the guy said.
Yeah,
okay. I know how to get the elbows down. And I'm looking, all of a sudden there's 3 elbows over there. And I'm like, which elbow?
Eeny, meeny, miny,
Yeah, whose elbow is supposed to go where?
That's funny.
And this. Yeah. And he was great. But that's, again, that just is the example. It's so cool.
It's pretty rad.
Yeah.
So what do you got from the poem?
So
I know we also have some questions that we can get into later.
Yeah,
but
we may hop into some.
this is one of our random episodes.
I've got a few things starred, some lines. All the best, and the best of all the preachers are the men who live their creeds. So one of the reasons that I underlined this is that there are several Christian creeds, Christian confessions, and things like that that are traditional foundations of belief that have been passed down throughout the ages. The Apostles' Creed is one that a lot of people know. The Nicene Creed is another one, and there's several different confessions that people adhere to or that churches adhere to, right? Primarily in the Bible Belt, we moved away from those because we felt like they limited the ability of the church to progress with the times. That's essentially what the thing was, that we're moving away from those things because it limited the ability of the church to progress with the times and to be flexible enough and all that.
Interesting.
But what it really did is it pushed us away from the foundations of our belief. And so now we're no longer living those creeds in the way that this poem talks about, or in the way that they were designed. You know, when you think about like the Apostles' Creed, I believe in God the Father, the Almighty Maker of heaven and earth, and Jesus Christ, His only begotten Son, our Lord, born of the Virgin Mary, crucified under Pontius Pilate, like those kinds of things. Those were things that the church taught from basically like infancy on until the last like 250 years.
That's crazy.
And those were things these kids would have known by heart. It's really hard to live out a creed of I believe in God the Father, the Almighty Maker of heaven and earth, when you're not taught that God the Father is the Almighty Maker of heaven and earth until you're in junior high, or you're in high school, or maybe you're in a church or in a religious sort of environment where the attributes of God are not something that are given the primacy that they deserve. And so, you're 25, you're 26, maybe you're in your 30s. Like some of the folks that we run into and that we're teaching apologetics to and Christian doctrine to, that they never understood the necessity to really dive into their faith until they're grown, married, and have kids. And they go, I didn't know that we believed this. It's like, well, if we were to go back to our creeds, we live our lives differently when we respect God as the Almighty Maker of heaven and earth than we do as, he's the genie that's supposed to give us the things that we want. And those types of things. So like this one in particular, like that stood out to me. There's two lines a little later on. And the lectures you deliver may be very wise and true, but I'd rather get my lessons by observing what you do. That feels like it's 100% my job, because this is a frustrating thing that I think a lot of ministers don't talk about is we're judged off of 20 to 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes every Sunday.
Yeah.
How effective we are at our job is judged there. And, there's a young lady in our church, she's 7, and she asked her dad, and her dad's a friend of mine, so I don't mind sharing the story, but she asked her dad, she was like, does Pastor Lucas have a job? And he was like, yeah, he's the pastor at our church. And she's like, yeah, but like only on Sundays and Wednesdays. And
how old is she?
She's 7.
Okay.
Right. And so, but he's explaining to her at 7, like, hey, there are other things that go into pastoring the church and all of that kind of stuff. And it was a really good teaching moment. I really thought that it was funny, but I've got some buddies of mine that have made the joke that, like, oh, you're a pastor, you kind of spend your week naked on a beanbag eating Cheetos. I was like, if that was the case, I'd stay off my beanbag. There's a lot of extra Cheeto dust there. But the truth of the matter is that there's a lot of ministers who feel that way. But I think a lot of those guys feel that way because they're not living out those things. And I think we talked about this, is that an admonition that was given to me by a friend of mine was, this guy was talking on a podcast, and he goes, the thing that I worry about the most is that there are pastors who are writing blogs that nobody asked for while widows go unvisited. I was like,
good Lord.
right? And he's right. Right? There's a lot of us that are doing things that nobody asked for us to do that are things that nobody are like we're basically just like shouting into an open room or into a vacuum. Like, and that's what most social media is, right?
Yeah.
But we're spending our time doing that.
Yeah.
And his point was not that like that's a negative thing.
Nope.
But when there are people in your church that need to be visited, whether it's at the hospital or there's phone calls to be made or whatever else, we would rather do those other things because we want to give the lecture and not live the life. And I think that those two lines in particular, man, were super convicting for me.
Yeah, I like that. And then what you're saying in regards to writing the blogs that nobody asked for and you know, widows going unseen, that's crazy to think about it that way. I mean, that's not how you live your life. I know that. Like, right. I know more, I think, just because of our friendship and our, you know, this podcast business partnership of what you do throughout the week with your wife and everything. And Amanda and I talk about it. We're like, it's just incredible, like what you guys do. And to be honest, I think it was part of the conviction for Amanda and I to step up and help lead some small groups at our church for the youth.
That's awesome,
we've been asked constantly, not constantly, but recently they've been asking like, hey, can you guys do one? And with my schedule, you know, it's
all over the place. Yeah.
It's all over the place, insane. And they said, you know, it'll be on Sundays. And I'm like, oh, well, you know, I'm kind of traveling on Sundays. And for the window that they have, I was like, I think I can actually do this. Mm-hmm. And so they're going to help on the first one. And then the second one, I won't be able to be. I'm like, hey, one of you guys are going to have to do this with Amanda. And they're like, dude, we got it. And then all the other ones, I think I'm going to be able to do all of them.
That's awesome.
Except for one. And by then, Amanda can run on her own. But we'll probably have like another couple come help her. But for me, it's just seeing how much you do, right? It's for me, it's convicting of like, hey, I can do more to provide value. And I kind of feel like I probably out of most people do a lot.
Yeah, you're a high capacity person.
I try to do a lot.
Yeah.
Not just busy work, but just actually provide value and do stuff that needs to be getting done. And to be honest, that's sometimes what'll cause frustration and arguments with Amanda and I, because she's like, hey, we need these things done. And I'm like, that's not a priority compared to these other things that are providing value to other people and to our family. And Amanda's awesome because she'll be like, okay, well, I get that. However, these things need to get done. I'm like, okay, well, let's figure out how we can meet in the middle, or do we hire somebody to do these other things? These are legitimate things that you need done around the house. Do we hire somebody? Or, you know, and so that's like kind of understand. And I know someone's probably listening like, bro, you've lost your mind. You're ridiculous. Like, you got to hire somebody to do stuff around your house, not doing it yourself. Well, right now is my current schedule. Yeah, you know.
But I don't think that it's just I think that there's wisdom in what you're saying, because there's the old like business adage that you can have two of three things. It can be fast, it can be cheaper, it can be good. It can be two of those three things, but it can't be all three.
Yeah.
Right. And when we're talking primarily like within the household, prioritizing and executing, I think there are times where, hey, these things have to be done, but they're not a priority of the family.
No.
Right. They do not fall in that priority. Now, there may be some of those where you're like, all right, well, this does have to be done. What's the real deadline on this?
Yeah.
If the real deadline on this is in 2 weeks, but it's just annoying you right now, we can find a time to prioritize it in the next 2 weeks. Yeah. But if it's not within the next 2 weeks, or, you know, it is one of these things that there is a short timeline on, but it doesn't fall on our priority list. Yeah. Finding a way to outsource that is an important thing to do in order to maintain not just alignment with your spouse, but to keep you on mission.
Yeah. And, you know, and to what you're saying, I know that kind of also counters one of the things that we talked about earlier is like, Jocko will look at stuff and be like, okay, hey, I have a podcast that needs to get recorded. I need to prep for a podcast tonight that's being recorded tomorrow. And I need to write for a book that, you know, I have a couple months. He goes, I'm looking at those. Which ones do I do? And most people answer like, well, yeah, you prep the podcast. He goes, most would think that. I do the other priority, because no matter what, I have to prep for the podcast, no matter what. And if I put off this other thing, then you can create the habit of just putting it off.
Right.
So that's why I go to the outsourcing mode. That's
Right.
my version of like, okay, get that thing done now, because we can pay somebody to do it. It's providing, you're supporting a small business, and it gives me that time freedom, right? And it gives me that time freedom to focus on other stuff. Or guess what? I'll pay somebody to go do stuff like around the house if it frees me up for an afternoon to go spend with my family. You know what that value is?
Yeah.
There's a big value on that because of how much I'm gone. And so that's one of the things that we're kind of like figuring out. And I can't remember like what brought us down that road of us talking about this.
Talking about the Bible study stuff, and then
Sorry. So all the stuff
where
that you
what
do,
those priorities are.
So understand those priorities, but it's crazy. Like I'm available for most of those, which is it's gonna be awesome.
That's
like
awesome.
Amanda and I are excited.
What a coincidence.
Yeah, exactly. But I really like that line as well, because for me, it goes back to what Cody and I get to do and teach at Echelon Front in regards to all the scenario-based leadership training.
Yep.
And obviously Danny and other instructors that help instruct on those, Justin building out the programs. But with it being Cody's department and when I started, I was kind of default to Cody and I. But it's an Echelon Front program, right? At the end of the day, it's an Echelon Front program that we all get to participate in. And it's crazy to see the value that comes from a full day of hands-on scenario-based leadership training. And that's where I kind of kept creeping back to and going back to in that line of, but I'd rather get my lessons by observing what you do, is because when you're going through the training, you're feeling it real time,
right?
Which, you're not just listening to somebody's words and like, oh, that's a good idea. You're actually, it's like the theory's gone. Like now it's the application. And what's cool is you're also watching other leaders work through problems and struggle through problems. And that does help with the progression of the group throughout the day, because they're not going to make the same mistakes. But then sometimes they do make the same mistakes, and it's like, hey man, we literally just talked about this 2 runs ago.
Yep.
You sat in that seat listening to me debrief Lucas on this failure that he had, and you did the same thing. Why? And we always go back to, because what we deal with is behaviors and tendencies. And now we're trying to expose the bad behaviors and expose the bad tendencies so that we can be mindful of what habits do we need to create to alter these behaviors and tendencies.
Yeah.
And, that's one of the things that I got from that poem as well. It's like, hey, when you're setting the example, people can see what they need to be doing. They can see the good, they can see the bad in what you're doing, and then they exposes it to themselves when they're doing that evaluation. So
yeah, the next line really got me too. I might misunderstand you and the high advice you give, and I think in particular, and it's followed by, but there is no misunderstanding how you act and how you live. That when we circle around to Echelon Front, the reason that Jocko and Leif wrote a follow-up book was not because they wanted to make more money. And this is one of the things that I think is so interesting about the Dichotomy of Leadership, is that in the introduction to Dichotomy of Leadership, what they talk about is, we wrote this book to correct the mistakes that people are making because they did not understand extreme ownership. That they understood the principles, right? But they didn't understand how to find the balance. And you and your other teammates who served with them, y'all watched them find the balance for these things. When you guys were training them, you watched them find the balance for it. But when you read Extreme Ownership, then you can take ownership to an extreme. You can take cover and move to an extreme. You can take decentralized command to an extreme, where now you have crippled your organization because you didn't understand how to properly implement one of the principles. Yeah. And so Dichotomy of Leadership was not written as, a follow-up book to make money. And hey, we had a great, there's 2 million copies of Extreme Ownership in print. We can do the same thing with Dichotomy of Leadership. No, they wrote Dichotomy of Leadership because they were like, hey, we're getting all of these questions about these people who have taken this to a level where they're no longer finding balance. We're going to course correct because they've done this. They've misunderstood the advice that we've given them, and we need to fix that. So when you're doing things like the experiential leadership training, right, FTX stuff, or when you're doing your workshops, whether it's half days or full days, how often do you end up coming up against someone who is misunderstanding the advice that you guys have given, and how do you walk them through figuring out what they really need to be doing?
Yeah, so there are times that we'll be working with the client and we'll do the pre-event call. And this is usually when I get the first little red flag is during the pre-event call. And usually a quote will come up just in the conversation, because I'll ask them like, hey, you know, what are some of the issues you're working with? What are some of the things you guys are doing well? Like, what's one takeaway that you want, you know, other than, hey, extreme ownership? Like, if your people would be talking about something and mindful of it, what would that be? So where you're like, hey, this is a win.
Yeah.
And the red flag for me that I hear is, well, if my people could just start taking ownership and that they could understand that they need to take ownership, then that's going to be a good thing.
Yep.
And for me, that's just an indicator that you missed the whole point, that this is actually about you.
Yeah.
And, you know, I tell leadership that all the time. I'm like, hey, here's the deal. If you think we're going to come in and just give some like motivational speech and tell your people that they're all messed up and that they got to be fixed, I'm like, we're not the right company. It's not what we do. This is what we teach. And to be honest, if you guys want it to be effective and worth your investment, you need to actually be understanding and living these principles first. You guys have read the book. That's why you're bringing us out here. And I will have that conversation with leaders. Like, I will tell the executive leadership team, the president, the CEO, the owner, like, it doesn't matter to me what their title is, because I take this serious and I want them to understand like how serious of a thing this is. Like,
Right.
You are wasting your money, and you could be causing issues amongst your organization by setting the tone that you've got all figured out and that they're all jacked up. Like, that's not the way this works.
Yeah.
Extreme ownership isn't about your team. It's not about your peers. It's not about your boss. It's about you. It's about you taking ownership and understanding what you need to be doing to help the people around you. It's an attitude, it's a mindset, you know, this can become part of your culture if done correctly. And so for me, the biggest problem that we have is where people think that, you know, they're good to go, but their team's not.
Right.
Well, who's been training them? Who's setting the example? Who's doing all these things? Now, to give some of these people credit, they might be calling us right away. Like, hey, they just read the book. Hey, we want this implemented in. We don't know how to do it properly. But for me, the problem is for the people that, you know, they're all about, you know, they listen to everyone at Jocko's podcast. They've read the book multiple times. You know, they're following Jocko and Leif on social media, and they themselves can't take ownership. They don't take ownership, which is crazy.
Yeah.
They'll be literally blaming their people for like basic stuff. And I'll have to literally correct them and be like, well, hold on. What did you say? And they're like, well, you know, and I'm like, well, hold on. Let's just say you were to take ownership of the situation. What would that look like? And I'll have these conversations, and they're like, right. Well, no, yeah, hey, I get what you're saying, but this is, they need to be taking ownership. I'm like, you first.
Yeah.
And so that's like, that's crazy to me that I'll actually have these types of conversations. And there are people that are like, oh, no, I just want my people taking ownership. If my people take ownership, we'll be good. I'm not going to take ownership, but if they will, and I'm just like, what?
Yeah, that goes back to there's no bad teams, there's only bad leaders.
Yeah, they don't like that chapter.
Yeah.
Guess what chapter?
I don't either.
Yeah, well, guess what chapter I hit heavy on
right
in that workshop when I know that there's that problem.
Yeah.
Chapter 2, no bad teams, only bad leaders. But again, we're professional. We do it the right way. I don't come in there and I'm not embarrassing the boss.
Right.
I'm not saying, hey, you want to know why we're here? You want to know why you really brought us here? Because you're jacked up.
Yeah.
We're not doing that.
Show.
Yeah. But we'll expose and say, hey, guys, here's the deal. If we're not happy with where we're at, if we're not happy with where our people are at, what's causing that? Is it our attitude? Is it the attitude we've created? Is it the culture that we've allowed to creep in? Is it the culture that we didn't create? So we'll start pulling the thread, and then we'll also explain to them like, hey guys, this is a very common thing, because as organizations grow, people get complacent, and it's hard to manage multiple people. And that's why ingraining this into who you are as a person, and then also into who your organization is absolutely critical. And that's why we have clients that, as they grow and expand their company, they will have us come out and work with the new companies that they're purchasing, the new departments, the new expansions. They have continual leadership training with us as they grow and expand, because they know like, hey, we can't let this slip away. This has to be a part of who we are. And the ones that do that, man, they thrive. And they do really well. So
I really am kind of fascinated with the idea that you turn down people from coming to some of these things that would be paying clients, because it's
like the muster or an FTX or
because it's not the thing is if they're going to pay to do it, it's not necessarily an ethical issue, because maybe you could train in or out of them the certain thing.
Oh, for sure.
But you would rather in the front work know, hey, this is what we're up against. I think that's a pretty interesting strategy.
Yeah, and I don't think any of us have ever actually told somebody like, hey, this isn't a good fit.
Right.
I think we have, after we worked with them a few times, where they try to get us back and we're like, hey, like, I think I'm not 100% on that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that was like a situation that was possibly developing.
Right.
But for the most part, like when I have that conversation, I'm just setting the tone, because I want the people to know like, hey, this isn't who we are. This is who we are. Because if you look at Jocko, if you follow him, and I mean, the dude's an intense guy. So what people think is we're going to come in there and whip their people in shape. I've actually had people say, I want you to come in and scare the crap out of my people and whip them in shape.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm on Zoom and the guy's saying it, and he's all fired up, and he's a big dude. He's athletic. You could tell he's just like getting after it.
He's bought in.
Yeah, he's fully bought in. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, man, I think you have the wrong person. Because he's thinking like, because like Jack will like sell me as like the mini version of Jocko, with like because of how we talk and how we deliver our keynotes and the intensity and the interaction and everything. And plus I've been with Jocko longer than any of these guys.
Right.
Well, except for like Jason Gardner, they were new guys together. But in regards to like work wise, in Ramadi, Tasking and Bruiser and Echelon Front. And so we definitely have that connection. It's like Leif and I would say, like, people would be like, are you guys related? We're like, I'm pretty close to it, but no, not officially,
Right.
But it's one of those things. And so I know some people like think like that's what we're going to do. And I remember telling this guy, I'm like, hey, I think you got the wrong person, wrong company, man. I was like, this isn't what we do. And I said, I could see how you could think that. And I was like, and if you want me to be intense and be emotional and passionate, I definitely do that.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to intimidate your people or scare them.
Yeah, this isn't Scared Straight business edition.
I'm not gonna whip them into shape.
Right.
I'm like, that's a tactical win, strategic loss. I'm like, and none of that actually works. I'm like, none of that actually works.
Right.
And again, I wasn't attacking his ego or him, but I was just explaining to him like what we do and why we do it. I'm like, and I could say, I was like, hey man, I get it. Like, I'm like, you follow Jocko, you listen to the podcast, you probably want that intensity. Now we bring the intensity. I said, but this is what that's going to look like. And I just broke down what we did for the day. And he's like, oh dude, heck yeah, man. He's like, this is going to be perfect. I said, hey, if you want, bring a few people to an FTX. They'll be nervous. They're not going to be scared, but they'll be nervous because the stress that they impose upon themselves is going to be far greater than we can ever impose upon them.
Yeah.
And, and he was like, okay, I mean, for example, we were doing an FTX up in Michigan, and it's at a paintball field, and we use laser tag systems.
Right.
Nothing's being shot at you. We do it so that you don't have to wear eye protection or a mask for you know what I mean, for the safety reasons.
Like simunitions or
yeah,
paintball
if you're
or
doing
something like
simulation paintball, you have to wear that stuff.
Yeah.
Well,
simunitions are uncomfortable.
yes, absolutely. Well, nobody wants that,
Right?
And we're not teaching tactics, so there's no purpose of that. And you know, there's a small percentage of people that are always like, oh, I want to do that, I want to feel. I'm like, no, you don't. Trust me, not against my role players, not against my role players. And I said, you know, as a leader, what's an important characteristic? Communication. It's one of the top, right? Yeah. Now, there's multiple characteristics. There are multiple skill sets that are very important, right? The ability to communicate, that's important. The ability to listen, pretty important. What about the ability to have empathy? Pretty important, right? And so these are all top ranking ones. I used to say communication was the number one skill set. And we were talking about it at instructor training. It's like, well, why do we say that? I'm like, well, because it is. And they're like, well, what about this and this? And I was like, man, I could have swore I heard it said it in a training before. And maybe I did, but the point wasn't if it had been said before. The point is, like, now as we grow and evolve ourselves, like, empathy is pretty important.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, empathy could be actually more important than your ability to communicate, because if you can't have empathy for somebody, you're not going to actually see what their perspective is. You're not going to listen to them. Therefore, then that affects your communication. So
hardcore.
All of these things go into it. And so we're talking about this, and I'm talking to these leaders. I'm like, so if I take away your ability to properly communicate, because now you have this Darth Vader paintball mask on, you can't talk, you don't know who you're looking at, you don't know who you're talking to, does that affect your ability to lead? And the guy's like, yes. I said, what are you here for? And he said, leadership training. I'm like, exactly. That's why we use it. And so anyways, we're talking through all this stuff, and we're going out there, and these guys are amped up, man. I mean, they are like jacked up on Mountain Dew.
Ready to go.
And the guy probably like shotgunned a 6-pack of Discipline Goes. I mean, these guys are just like in it, and we're going out there, and I step on a paintball, and it like explodes. The paint hits him in the side of the face. He turns around and yells, "I've been hit," and just starts shooting his laser tag system in the rear direction, because in his mind, he just got shot by a paintball. Had zero ability to detach and recognize that nobody's shooting paintballs at you. And the guy was literally yelling, "Contact rear, contact," and just shooting. And I'm like, I get on the radio. I'm like, well, he's not being shot, because I can look at his sensors. I'm like, so I got on the radio to say, are any of you guys shooting at him? And I recognize nobody's shooting at him. And I'm like looking at him. I'm like, oh, he just got paint exploded on his face. Oh my gosh. But it was funny because we talked about it afterwards. I'm like, hey man, you good? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, what happened? He's like, I thought I got shot by a paintball and we were getting attacked. I'm like, do you have a paintball gun? He goes, no, I realize that now. I mean, the guy was so amped up. I mean, we'll see people like in the field training exercises literally come around the corner. It's their teammate, the same color gear, the same color shirt, and they will shoot each other. They will have blue on blues because they are so nervous and so scared. And so I was explaining that to this leader. I was like, hey man, if you want your people nervous and on edge to add some stress so that they understand the importance of the training, bring them out to an FTX.
Yeah.
But we don't come in and yell and scream at your people. Like we're not going to do that.
We just let them pretend to shoot each other and then then wallow in misery.
Yes. We'll work through that one. So
which that's the whole idea behind the experiential leadership training is those kinds of things. When you're dealing with someone that is wanting to whip everybody else into shape, that like has that mindset, that is what I think a lot of particularly guys who were former athletes, I say guys, people who were former athletes that are in leadership positions, that was often what was exemplified to us, right? Is that the coach or, whether it was the head coach or maybe it was a coordinator or maybe it was a position coach or whatever, motivated us by yelling, cussing, screaming, denying, you don't need water, and, go puke over the corner. Yeah. But like all of those things. I was really caught off guard when you weren't like that. Like, so what I had heard, I've heard some other Navy SEALs who were great athletes give motivational speeches.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And then I've heard some people who are now in like the motivational speech sort of sector, I guess is as a way to put it, who have military backgrounds.
Yeah.
And they all kind of follow this, they seem a lot like the guy from Full Metal Jacket, right? They're like, that's their persona.
Just dropping F-bombs all the time.
Yeah. And that, they're going to motivate you to be and to live like a soldier and to do all of this, blah, blah, blah. And when I first heard about Jocko, probably 4 years ago, and they were like, hey, he's this Navy SEAL. He's on Joe Rogan, and he wrote this book. I was like,
nope.
Sorry.
Not for me.
Not going to happen. and I know that we've talked about it before just with you and I. It wasn't until like I met you, and I think that there was some mutual skepticism about what each of us was going to be like based off of what was pitched.
Oh, for
right?
sure.
Like, hey, this guy can do these things in this studio and is kind of like turnkey. And you were like, all right, well, I guess if he can, we'll see it.
Yeah.
And
I've been a guest on a lot of podcasts.
Right,
We'll
see. Yeah. And then on the other end, I get that, he's this Navy SEAL who worked with Jocko. Mind you, I had never listened to anything, but I already had him in this box.
Yeah.
And therefore you. And so.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And so when we met each other, it was months after we had worked together before I read Extreme Ownership, but it wasn't until like I saw who you were, you and I had hung out, I saw what you were doing and the type of man that you were before I looked into those kinds of things. Do you think that just being around the team that y'all have created at the FTX, right? So which is you and Danny Ziem, who we've had on the show, and Game Day Gandy, who's been on the show, and some of the other, not just your role players, but some of the other guys that you were bringing up in Echelon Front that are now not just like buying into the principles that you guys teach, but also are now ambassadors of the culture that you're teaching businesses to take back. Do you think that there is something that kind of clicks for some of these leaders just by being around you that they're not getting from the books, and they may not actually be getting from like going through the exercises and the training, but are literally just watching the example that you guys set, your interactions with one another, and particularly your interactions with them, where they're like, so. This is different.
Yeah, I do think so, because we have multiple people that attend multiple musters and now FTXs. Yeah. And they're not cheap. Like the muster is not cheap.
No, it's not.
And FTX,
it's still a great value. The mustard is still one of the greatest value things that I think are out there, especially when you look at like, and I know that I said this before, and it's important. I cannot reiterate how much everybody needs to understand. I am not an Echelon Front employee. Yeah. Right. We do this. It's fun for me. I love hanging out with you. I love picking your brain on stuff. But Echelon Front doesn't do anything in the sense of like paying me to say any of this stuff or anything like that, which is why I get away with making the mustard patch, right? Yeah. But you're one alibi. Yeah, right. But the thing is, like, there are leadership conferences where you're paying $5,000 and $10,000 and $15,000
crazy
to go to a 5,000 seat place to listen to people that you will never have the opportunity to talk to, that are just pushing their books and hawking their stuff, and then that's going to be the end of it. And you guys cap what your attendance can be. You are so personable and things within it. Like yes, it's not cheap, but it is far from what other businesses or what businesses are spending and individuals are spending to get much less value out of it. Yeah, that's my 2 cents.
The return on your investment is incredible. And there are people that do that over and over and over. Yeah. And it's not because there's fanboys. I mean, I'm sure there's a few fanboys of Jocko and Leif for sure. Definitely. But that come to multiple events. But the majority, and I'm saying like the majority of the majority, is people that are there to interact with the team and also to interact with different attendees every single time. So they're networking, they're learning something new each time. And then, like I know a few of them have now started doing multiple FTXs, and they'll send 5 to 10 of their employees each time that we're doing an FTX as an investment into their people. And then they're also coming and shadowing and watching the FTX and everything. And I think it's just the opportunity for them to see how we do things, and they start incorporating it into their own cultures as well.
Yeah, I do think, continually, like, going back to this poem that you opened everything up with, there was something special about being around y'all at the muster that it pushed this idea that I had prior to meeting you and prior to, actually listening to or reading anything that Jocko or Leif had ever done. It pushed that so far, like, into the back now, that when I'm telling, like, when I'm handing them copies of Extreme Ownership, I'm like, you need to read this book. This is, for a leadership book, it's going to change this. Or when I'm telling, I'm giving it to some of the people that we're training at our church, and they're like, hey, what are the leadership things that we do, the principles that we look at. I'm like, this is what we implement now. I want you to read this book. This is what it was. And they're like, I don't really. I was like, then you can skip the war story, right? Skip the war, because the war story is not what it's about.
No.
Right? Read the principle, read the application to business. If those are the things that are going to stick, skip that stuff. This is not, I was like, but before you read it, you're going to see the Navy SEAL stuff in there. They're going to talk about the Navy SEAL stuff, whatever. This isn't a gunny sergeant that's trying to breathe down your neck and tell you that, if only you'd wake up and have discipline and do 50 push-ups in the morning, then you'd be the man that you wanted to be.
Yeah.
These guys are genuine, authentic. They are empathetic. They're humble. They're telling you these are the experiences that we had, good, bad, and indifferent, that caused us to reevaluate what we were doing in order that we could have something that's teachable. And I've noticed every time I rephrase that, male, female, whatever, they've gone through and they've read it with the open mind that I wouldn't have in the beginning. And that they're like, holy smokes, like, this is totally.
And it just, for that alone right there, Lucas, is such a good leadership lesson of finding an effective way to communicate to people.
No doubt.
To overcome their objectives, and also to take preemptive ownership over some of the objectives that you think might pop up. So now you're just eliminating things before they even show up. It gives you that, the ability to lead and influence your people. And then when people read through the book, whether it's Extreme Ownership or you're doing this in a Bible study or, something else, like getting somebody to change some habits, you're helping somebody do something that's going to better their life.
Yeah.
And therefore, bro, I mean, you're creating impact, and it's freaking incredible. One of the lines, and then we can close it out with the final question or something if you got one, I like, is, who stands with men of honor learns to hold his honor dear. It's just the people you surround yourself with is absolutely critical. And I know we've talked about this before, and just to reiterate that, who stands with men of honor learns to hold his honor dear. Proverbs 17:27, right? Iron sharpens iron. And to me, like, it's just a good reminder. Like, who do you spend the most time with? And that's why being at church is important. Yes, you can read the Bible, you can know the Bible, you can pray, you can have a relationship with God without going to church. I understand that. Yeah. However, like, I think you're going to struggle. Like, if you're not plugged into a church, you're going to struggle as a Christian.
Yeah. You're
going to have some hardships. You're going to have some temptations. And you don't think the devil's going to mess with you? Like, to me, I'm just thinking, like, if you're isolating yourself, you're putting yourself in a dangerous position. Now, there's a difference between isolation and solitude, right?
Yeah, we talked about that before.
Yeah, and it's like, hey, if you want to go find solitude, that's great. You should. That's one of the things that you get to do at a pursuit, and it's one of the things I like. That honestly, if I'm on a flight, I just throw on headphones, and if I'm not talking to somebody, I put in the headphones, and it's just alone time. Mm-hmm. And but if you're isolating yourself and you're not a part of a community, you're not going to the gym, You're not plugged into a church. You don't have a small group. Like, you are putting yourself in a dangerous situation for the spiritual warfare attacks to just be at an all-time high. Because if I'm looking at attacking two different scenarios, and I see a group of like 10 guys, and I see one person, which one do you think I want to attack?
The solo.
Every single time.
Yeah.
Every single time. And so we have to be surrounding ourselves. And then if we're surrounding ourselves with men and women of honor and dignity, who know how to conduct themselves, who are humble, so that we know what humility looks like. They're patient, they're kind, they treat a waitress and a waiter with respect.
Yeah.
They treat the gate agent with respect. They see trash in a parking lot and they pick it up and throw it away, because they don't have to, but they do it because that's the right thing to do. Like, when you see and you're surrounded by people that do these things, you know that you should be doing those same things. And I think this also kind of goes to what we were talking about with the people that just come to Echelon Front to see what we do.
Mm-hmm.
It's to surround themselves. And I love it, because think about how many people I get access to every single week to learn from. Thousands.
Yep.
Thousands of people, sometimes tens of thousands of people in a week that I get to interact with. And some people are like, that's impossible. How is that? No, some of these events, have thousands and thousands of people at them. And if the schedule allows it, we're interacting with those people on breaks and then afterwards. And I did that event for O'Reilly one time. I stayed like 5 or 6 hours afterwards, taking pictures and talking to every single person.
Yep.
And they had 11,000 people at that event.
Good grief.
Yeah. And so it's pretty incredible when I think about what I get to do and what you get to do, and now what we get to do with this podcast. So
cool.
Yeah, unless you have any questions, I think this is a good transition. I'm sure you got something.
Sure,
there's so many ways we can go.
There's always something, like if I can ask one question about that line in particular, right, is, when you look at like finding those people who are honorable around you, right? It brings to mind the scripture, where Paul is telling the church, like, imitate me only as I imitate Christ, right?
That's good.
But when I look at this, there's a lot of us that are going to see ourselves. There's a lot of people who are going to see themselves and they're like, you know what? I'm trying to get back on my feet, and I don't know someone that's honorable. I'm in a situation where, maybe I was raised, I'm thinking of a person in particular, raised by a single parent, in a bad neighborhood, grew up with around a bunch of folks that aren't. He's trying to do his best to kind of pull himself up and out of that situation. How do you learn to be the honorable man to inspire others to do the same thing?
Well, the easy answer is read the Bible, because the Bible is God's written word to us.
There you go.
It gives you, there's a lot of really good examples, and the Bible has a lot of really good examples of what not to do.
Yeah, no doubt.
Which is awesome.
Yeah.
But that's going to be the easy, like, something that you can do right now. You can download the Bible app and start reading Proverbs. The book of wisdom.
Yeah.
The books of wisdom. Sorry.
Yeah.
You're right.
Great start.
Yeah, it's a great start. Like, start reading Proverbs. There's 31 chapters. There's 31 days in most months. So just let's go there. But the next thing is plug into a church.
Yeah.
You can find a church. If you live in America, you can find a church.
Yeah.
There's no reason why you can't. You can find virtual access to a church. Like our church does things like the virtual stuff on the weekends. We literally have an online pastor he's in that studio listening and then interacting with the people that are typing stuff online, like talking with them. Hey, how was your week? What do you need prayers for? Hey, boom, boom. Like, we have an online pastor. Yeah. That's his job. Pastor Luke, he's awesome. And,
good name too.
I thought so. And, so you can find a church, and then, the next thing is, like I said, find some sort of a community that you can be a part of that you like. I'm going to say Jiu-Jitsu. Maybe you can't afford it. Okay, work something out with a gym, or even if you can't do that, I'm always going to go back to the church. Find a church, plug into a church, find some small groups, start serving at your church. Like, hey, you want to have fulfillment? Serve some people.
Yeah.
Go down to a homeless shelter and serve some meals. It's going to change your perspective real quick. And it'll help you just have a different outlook as you're trying to move forward and get yourself plugged into it. Your circumstance doesn't dictate who you're going to be.
Yeah.
You choose that. Because I know of a handful of examples of people that were raised with awesome parents in great environments that turned out to be not so good people. Some of them, like Danny and I were talking about, like guys we went to high school with, grew up in a good neighborhood, had good parents, are in jail for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
A few of them where I was like, hey, so-and-so, he's like, oh yeah, he died. I'm like, what? How? He goes, oh, he got arrested. He got stabbed in prison. You're like, oh, that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like literally we lived in the same city.
Yeah.
He had awesome parents. And then I know of like people that I served with in the military. I remember guys in boot camp were explaining to me what the south side of Chicago was like. Like literally, like these dudes had scars on their face from getting cut in gang fights. And I'm like, I grew up in Sacramento, California, in a little town called Fair Oaks. It was an awesome place to live.
Yeah, yeah, right.
I had good parents, as I've talked about, good aunts and uncles, good grandparents, good friends, like good neighborhood. Like it was awesome. And then I'm in the military and I'm literally meeting other 18-year-old kids, like we're boys, and they have scars on their body and on their face from being cut up in gang fights, and telling me what like Section 8 housing in South Chicago is like. And you're just like, okay. And you know what? They chose to join the military to get away from that.
Yeah.
Ian, who you met,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to share his story because he will come on here and share his story. And you and I are just going to be sitting there going, but, his brother was killed in a drive-by shooting.
Wow.
And it's just like, just so many crazy things. And Ian still chooses to not be a victim of that environment. Like grew up super poor, just like 8 people in a 1-bedroom apartment. Still did some things he's not proud of. And then when you hear the story in the situation, like I haven't met one person where they hear the story that they have any judgment on them. And they're like, hey bro, you're kind of doing what you had to do. And he's like, yeah, but I shouldn't have. And you're like, you are a man of integrity.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and so guess what? Ian is still choosing to make a better life for himself. Like wants to move up to this area and do some stuff. And it's just, he's constantly going to pursuits to help serve and drives up to Jesus in Jiu-Jitsu 90 minutes. And he brought a few guys from his gym and he brought his mom, you know what I mean? And you're just like, this kid literally could be in a gang or could be dealing drugs or could be like just living a bad life. And there'd be people like, well, that's just kind of the way that's the situation he was dealt. No, you can choose to get yourself out of it. It's a choice you have to make. You have to be intentional, and then you have to take action.
Yeah.
And also understand that it's never going to be an instant, easy fix. Like there's going to take some time. There's going to be some work that you're going to have to put in to make those changes. But you can make excuses or you can make things happen. You can't do both. Which of those are you choosing to do?
Yeah, that is the truth.
What else?
Well, there's a bunch of other stuff, but we're like right up against that time limit that we want to be at. So.
Yeah. Actually slightly over it. I apologize.
Yeah.
Okay.
Apology accepted.
I wasn't apologizing to you.
Oh, well, in that
I'm
case,
just kidding. I was.
denied.
That's rude. I'm revoking your questions for next time.
Well, that makes sense.
Hey,
That pushed us over.
As you guys all know, we appreciate all the support. And if you're listening on iTunes and Spotify and not YouTube, keep listening. But if you would like to subscribe to the YouTube channel and hit that notification
bell,
button,
that's it.
Bell, whatever.
Ding the little bell.
Yeah, it will help us and it'll help you get notified when we have other stuff that we're going to start putting out in addition to the Fridays. So we appreciate all you guys' support by listening, sharing, commenting, subscribing, all that awesome stuff. If you want to follow us on social media, I am at JP Dinnell. Lucas is at Lucas Pinckard, Lucaspinckard. Make sure you're also following Echelon Front. We're on social media at Echelon Front. Website is echelonfront.com. You can check out some of the future events that we have, or if you want one of our instructors to come work with you and your team, you can get some more information on that. If you want to, you can also check out at Jesus and Jiu-Jitsu _USA, a ministry that I'm a part of with Isaac Tauefa, Stephen Little, Josh Strasburger. We also have a podcast that we do called the Jesus and Jiu-Jitsu podcast. That last episode with Troy was
good.
Dude, he's an awesome dude. And we also do live events about every 5 to 6 weeks at different gyms. I think our next one coming up is going to be March 2nd, I believe, at Eclipse Jiu-Jitsu. But if you want that official announcement, you should be following us on Instagram. But I believe it's going to be March 2nd at our buddy Anthony Cronk's gym. Also a partner of a Texas beef company, Little Cattle Co. We are at Little Cattle Co. On Instagram. The website is littlecattle.co. So it's our company name. My best friend Stephen Little started back in 2017. My wife and I partnered up with him and his wife in early 2023. We can deliver beef anywhere in the lower 48. And we can also send boxes of beef to your customers and clients if you're looking for a unique way to show them appreciation any time of the year. And it's really cool how we've been able to do that for some of our just our listeners, and from this podcast and Jesus and Jiu-Jitsu, and also some of my Echelon Front customers and clients have used that to give gifts to some of their people, and it's been a huge hit, which is awesome.
Everybody wants to get that beef.
Let's go, dog. Gotta get that beef. Also partner with other best friend Josh Strasburger for a printing company that we have called On the Path Printing. On Instagram, we're at On the Path Printing. So check it out. If you need some apparel printed, we will hook you up. Also, I want to thank all the support that Origin and Jocko Fuel has given myself, my family, and anything I've been a part of over all the years. What they're doing is just incredible. Bringing the manufacturing back to America, 100% American-made gis, rash guards. They started in the jiu-jitsu world, moved into jeans, and then hoodies and t-shirts and boots. And outside of jeans, now they have these different types of pants, which are incredible. The Versa pant is unreal. The Nylock pant, which was their hunt line, was unreal. So they have their American-made hunt line, 100% American-made hunt line. And then they
original breakup. Like they came up with their own breakup so they didn't have to use somebody else's, which is super cool.
Dude, it's so awesome.
So legit.
Also, one of the guys that's been helping them, Kip, that started co-founded Under Armour. He wants to come on this podcast as well and share his story.
That would be no reason.
Yeah. Hey, Kip, don't listen to Lucas right now. Just listen to what I'm saying. So we're looking forward to that. But yeah, everything Origin and Jocko Fuel do is absolutely incredible.
Yeah,
best supplements out in the game. They're actually healthy. They're good for you. They have healthy energy drinks. You're not going to get to the jitters, the shakes, the crash from it. Really good protein. All the supplements are incredible. So appreciate everything that they do. I know you have a couple pairs of their jeans.
Yeah, I've got some of the jeans. I'm wearing the RTX shirt.
The RTX shirt.
Right, yeah, I got the boots coming.
Execute.
Yeah. There's also, if you're not on their email list, you need to get on it. Jocko Fuel is doing buy one get one 50% off thing that's going on for this was I came to Kirsten and I was like, honey, I don't ask for much allowance here whenever we're doing this, but this is buy one get one half off. She's like, get what you need, right? So
she also takes some of the products as well.
Oh yeah, for sure, right?
They're good for her.
And so we're up. We got our Jocko Fuel order that's about to come down, and then Origin just sent out a thing that they're doing a limited run of their legacy boots. So the Lincoln boot is back for a limited time, which is a gorgeous. I have that boot. As far as footwear, like I'm not crazy about footwear, but that's a good looking boot, and it goes with a lot of stuff like casual or dress if you want to do it. So it's
my buddy Dennis, who just got his brown belt.
Congratulations.
Yes, he got that. And Origin they had these uncut videos that they do on YouTube, and they're awesome. They're so good to watch. But Dennis's reaction to getting his brown belt was incredible. Long time coming. I'm like, bro, when is the homeboy gonna get his brown belt?
Yeah.
Like, he is really good. But he'll send me pictures of them working on stuff. And then when they were bringing back that boot, he sent me a picture of them like building one of the boots. And I'm like, oh, that's so beautiful. I have one of the Lincolns. And then I have the all blacked out bison boot.
I see those in your Instagram pictures a lot.
Yeah.
I try not to be envious of your footwear. I was like, mine's coming.
Yes, yours is.
Still, now I'm like, now I'm 5 to 7 weeks away instead of 6 to 8. So I'm counting them down, baby.
Let's go. That's awesome. So, hey, if you want to support yourself and support an American-made product line and company that's helping the American workers, go to originusa.com and or jockofuel.com. Get your supplements, clean energy drinks, get your clothes. As we close it out, I just want to, just reiterate to you, just be intentional about who you are and how you're conducting yourself around your family, around your spouse, around your peers, your coworkers, your boss, because you have the ability to influence people one way or the other. And if we're more intentional with living our lives to be Christ-like and living our lives to honor Christ and honor our fallen teammates and to honor our family and to honor our family values and to honor our nation, whatever it is that you want to honor, if you're intentional about living your life to honor them and hopefully honor Him, it will give you the right guidance to say the right things, to do the right things, so that you can influence somebody else to be able to do the same thing. So this has been the JP Dinnell Podcast, episode 20.